Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another of my monologues up here in the studio today. Um, I, I want to talk about legislation in today's episode because it doesn't seem that this legislation is actually acting for our behalf. I mean, I know it's been invented some time ago, and there are books and books and books and books and books and books and huge numbers of books and books and books. With it, you often see the lawyers sitting in their offices or the solicitors sitting there, and behind them they have loads and loads of it. And you would think that because legislation has been written, it's supposed to be there for the benefit of people, is it not? It's supposed to be there, this is what we're told anyway, that it's there to sort of help and give us some guidance and some rules and those sort of things to sort of help everybody. I mean, these are all written by public servants, aren't they? And if it's written by public servants, and we the people are paying for all of this, and we have been paying all our lives religiously, as if it's some sort of special thing that we have to do, and it's supposed to be there for our benefit. But it does seem a lot of this legislation that has been written is just not for our benefit anymore. I mean, a number of people will see that the legislation seems to be actually doing the damn opposite. It's doing the opposite. It seems to be harming rather than helping. And you would think, and I'm talking here as if I'm ignorant of the fact, but you would think that the legislation is there to sort of be a benefit to you and I. But it does seem it isn't. And here's the for instance. We know that there's a lot of troubles in the world, and one of the troubles is that many people see that farming is under attack and our food is being manipulated, changed, and all of that. I did an interview the other day with Mark Byford, the bowler hat farmer, and he's just launched the Food Hub, and it's definitely well worth going and have a looking at that. I'll put a link to the video that we did so you can go and check out the Food Hub and all of that. Now, there's a number of people who fed up, actually, with living in towns, especially as they're being turned into these 15-minute cities, and we've seen these 5G towers going up. And we're all a little bit nervous about whether the 5G is actually there, either as some strange weapon system or whether it's there going to just radiate our brains, because this sort of thing has not been tested in any real significant measure for any particular length of time, and so a number of people are affected by it. Some people cannot live where they are because these 5G things are in there. Other people do not want to have their fires taken away, their wood-burning stoves. They don't want to necessarily have to have their gas boilers being taken away. And we know that there is, of course, this Agenda 30 business that says you won't be able to fly, you won't have cars in the future, you won't even have the clothes that you're standing up in. And so one of the things with the farmers' situation is many people want to get back to the land, and you can't blame them. I would like to get back to the land. But the legislation, you see, seems to be very prohibitive. Many people would like to just get on the land, build a little hut, do some farming, not hurt anybody, and if it's near a town or a village, perhaps offer the surplus that they're growing to local people, put a little farm shop maybe, and sell some of their stuff. But this, thanks to the legislation, which you can understand that some measure is there to sort of protect people from buying stuff which is not fit for human consumption, shall we say. But on the whole, most people, if they did their own due diligence, could have a look at it and go, well, actually, that's just, that's some onions, that's potatoes. You know, they could sample it. If they don't like it, well, they wouldn't buy it again. And if it was really bad, I suppose they could go and complain and say, actually, these potatoes are no good. And if anybody was really any good at what they did and honourable, they would say, well, don't worry, I'll give you some fresh potatoes which are better. Anyway, the point is, and this is how I see it, that many people would like to get onto the land and grow stuff, but the legislation, especially the planning regs, would say, oh no, you can't do that. Now, I understand that, of course, some people will abuse the system. Of course they will. Some people are like that, and that's a shame. But most people, I think, just want to get on and do things, but the legislation is there to stop them. Now, we do seem to be in a situation in which, let's face it, the world is going into a strange place at the moment. More people want to get out there and grow some food, have some animals, and not muck about with all the rules and regulations and all the red tape, which does seem, on the whole, pretty unnecessary. It seems to be there more to hinder than to help. And it struck me that if legislation is there hindering people and is not actually there for the benefit of people, then the legislation is not worth having. And at some point, the people have got to sort of wake themselves up and say, well, hold on a minute, we are the ones in charge. We're the ones that pay with taxes on the whole. We pay for all these people to write this legislation. If it's not actually of any benefit to us, what the hell is it doing for us? And we should therefore be in a position to say, no, we don't want it, thank you very much. Scribble it away, tear it all up, chuck it in the bin, and let's start again. Let's have some legislation that is actually beneficial to people. So if people want to buy, say, from a farmer at the moment, a lot of farmers, for example, are going through a lot of trouble. And some of those farmers may say, do you know what, I just want to sell 5 acres over here or 10 acres over there. I'm not really using it. And to be honest, I could get some people on the land, they could grow some stuff and they could help. I'll deal with some of the bigger commodities of wheat and barley and those sort of things. And other people may want to grow some vegetables and simple stuff and have a nice quiet life. Why wouldn't you? Some of us do want to get back to nature. Some of us want to live in woodland, for example, have a little house in there, bring up our children, completely independent from what the state wants. But that seems to be extremely difficult for people to do. And that's where the legislation is working against us yet again. And it's very odd. Now, I mention this because if the legislation, as I say, is not of benefit to the people, why are we in the situation that we have it? Surely, if more and more people were to wake up to the fact that this legislation is not really helpful, let's just not deal with it. If significant numbers turned around and said, actually, we are the people who put you into power, we're the people who say, no, we'd rather not have any of this nonsense, we want to get back to the land and grow things for the benefit of everybody else, why are you stopping us? Why are you preventing us doing something which is quite laudable and commendable, and that many people want to be able to do that? And as I say, with the 5G and other things that have been put against us, excuse me, I'm going to cough. Why are those things against us? Now, I suppose it depends on which jurisdiction you put yourself into. Because if you go into that whole voting business where you acquiesce and say, actually, I'm going to be in their legal system, that's where it seems all the problems are. Whereas if you say, actually, I don't want to be in that jurisdiction anymore, I want to get out of that jurisdiction, I don't want to be a person, I want to be one of the people, I want to just be completely independent from your stuff, work on the land, grow what I want to grow, look after some animals, perhaps have a dairy farm and sell raw milk. Many farmers do want to sell raw milk. I was told only the other day about another farm that was told, nope, you can't sell your raw milk for various silly reasons, and so the farmers are having to comply. Now, many farmers, of course, are suffering from this inheritance tax, this death duty, as it's known. Well, again, this does seem to be rather unhelpful, doesn't it? And some of the big corporations, the dead entities, are sort of swiftly moving in, buying up the land left, right, and centre, and putting things like solar panels all over the place on the basis that actually, you know, the planet is heating up, which we've been hearing about for so blooming long that nothing has actually happened. If you go outside these days, the sky is so grey, it's so cold, it's so miserable, it's so dull. I can't see that we're in this so-called age of boiling or whatever it's supposed to be, burning up, where the planet is all getting covered in black soot and smoke from the sun and the CO2 gases and all of that sort of nonsense. Well, it just comes to my mind that actually we want to step outside from that jurisdiction, say, no, I'm not going to accept that title of Mr. and be a master of master of a boat in the law of admiralty, or a mariner and all of that. I want to be back on the land. I want to grow stuff. I want to be honourable. I want to be able to invite people round, build something that is very simple. I'm not saying that you need to throw away some guidance altogether, because obviously, as I say, there will be people who will take advantage of it. And people, if they were going to go onto the land, ought to, in my humble opinion, build something that is sympathetic to the land that they're in. And of course, if they're going to cause problems with neighbours, if they're going to leave, as we often sometimes do see, rubbish strewn all over the countryside. Obviously, that's not a thing that anybody wants, or old cars that have been caught fire and left rusting and, that sort of thing. Nobody wants to see that. The people who want to get back onto the land and grow things do actually want to respect the land. They know that they are custodians of the land. They want to be able to pass it on to their families. They don't want to pay death duties and all of that. And our land is extremely important. Now, A.G. Street, you may not have heard of him, but he was a farmer in the 1940s. He did appear on television quite a bit of time and on the radio, and he became a bit of an authoritative on farming back in that period. And he had an axiom. He had two axioms, in fact, two of them. And the first one was the land should come first. Because if you don't look after the land, if you don't look after the soil, if you don't care for the land, then the future generations will have nothing. And it does seem as if this government and previous governments have not really cared too much about the land, or have become so power mad they've prevented people who want to improve with regeneration farming and all of that, biodynamics and all of those sort of things, to prevent them from doing that. And that seems extremely sad to me. That was the first axiom he had. The second axiom was that farmers, now I know current farmers may disagree with this, but bear in mind this was in the 1930s, were saying that actually farmers shouldn't get subsidies. They shouldn't be made the charitable case, the sad case of industry. He was under the impression that if anybody was going to get subsidies, if not just farmers, but everybody should have them, or nobody. You can't just sort of demonize farmers as if that they can't cope. Now, speaking to people like Mark Byford, the bowler hat farmer, he knows, as does Charles Dowding, that if you do the no-dig process out of, say, 1 acre of land, you can get loads of food. You don't need the artificials. You don't need all the herbicides and fungicides. People have very much forgotten how the natural nature process of growing food came about. Now, I'm not blaming farmers at all. I think farmers have been funneled into these big contracts with big monoculture, and they know that actually as a result of this upgrading and having huge swathes of land under things like corn, which is going to the processing plants and creating food in the supermarkets, which is nutrient-free and vitamin deficient and not really good for human consumption on a long-term basis, that actually we should be getting many more farmers, and so we could produce more food. And if we were able to get people back onto the land, those that want to, there's plenty of young people who have no notion what farming is. They've no notion that they could bring up pigs or look after cows or keep chickens or bees or any of the things that we have on the farm in small farms on a few acres. And it just seems that the government and legislation is there to stop that. Governments, of course, are being run not by those people that we see in charge going and talking on the television, but by mysterious people behind the scenes. Because let's face it, whoever you vote for, it doesn't really make any difference. The government and those people behind the government who are pulling the strings always get in. Well, there comes a point, I think, when people must make up their own mind and say, do you know what? These public servants, they're no longer actually serving us anymore. And so it's time to ditch them. It's time to decide for ourselves we're going to do this en masse. And so I would love to see farmers being able to offer land, maybe rented so they can earn some living, from those people who want to sort of hire 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 acres and build a little wooden hut so it's not going to damage, keep it off the ground on some staddle stones, that sort of thing, and get down there and do some serious farming for themselves, being self-sufficient. And then any surplus selling on, as I say, a little farm stall at the end of their land, or getting together with a load of other self-sufficient farmers and just being able to sell the surplus at a reasonable cost, healthy, organic, without the herbicides, the insecticides, the pesticides, and the glyphosate, however you pronounce it. I was told the other day how to pronounce it and I can never quite remember. But these poisons that are sprayed onto the crops. People can do this it would be nice to let them have a chance, wouldn't it? I mean, I know a lot of people will be, oh, no, because if you fill up the countryside with all these people, it'll look a mess. Well, obviously, you need to be able to curtail that bit. You don't want it to look a complete mess. But let's give people a chance, shall we? Let's give people a chance to get back to the land who want to grow in a very small way, enough for them and enough for their families to barter with another. So somebody's got pigs and somebody's got cows and they're exchanging and trading. I think it's come to a point now where the corporations have shown that they're not interested in people anymore. They're not interested in the great mass of those that live here. They do want to assist the government and the agendas to push people into these ever more 15-minute cities, onto these concentrated new builds where they've got mean houses. They all look the same. The gardens are non-existent. You're not allowed to park your car here. You're fined left, right and centre. And if the legislation isn't really working, isn't it time that we said enough? Isn't it time we said, look, everybody just wants to get on. I'm not saying that we want to be in some sort of anarchy. I mean, self-rule, as anarchy is, I think is actually, at the end of the day, probably a good way of doing it. Because I think most people do have good morals, that most people do want to get on with each other. But I don't think we're quite ready for that. We do need guidance and some help because, let's face it, we've lived under an oppressive regime for so long, which has pretended to be benevolent and kind and philanthropic and all those things. But actually, when we start looking about it, and this particular government in question has really shown their colours, and the legislation is not helping any of us to thrive. And I think that one of the things about being alive on this planet, if it is a planet, whatever it is, whatever this domain is that we find ourselves in as spiritual beings, that we're there to thrive. And many of us would love to grow stuff and to share and bring people round and have very hospitable and wonderful, not hospitable, hospitable, yes, not inhospitable, I was getting the wrong word there, hospitable environments in which people come, we have our traditions, we have our customs, a bit like the Amish. They're not hurting anybody, are they? They're just going about in the ways that they like to do, which is very honourable, very laudable, and very satisfying. It gives people a purpose to their life. It gives people a sense of achievement. When you grow something, when you work with nature, it's absolutely wonderful. And I think a lot of people would like to do that. Now, you may disagree. You may think that people shouldn't do that. You may think people should go into these 15-minute cities and be under the thumb. And if they happen to do something, where no crime has really happened, such as going down a motorway in a few miles an hour more than anybody else, but there's no damage done, there's no crime, there's nobody's hurt, there's nobody injured, that they should be photographed by cameras on gantries and then taken to court and fined. It does seem that the corporations now, of which the government is one of them and has its own duns and Bradstreet's number, just as the judges do in the judiciary, just as the courts and just as the councils all do seem to be really there about collecting money from everybody. And we the people, that we're the ones that are on, there's more of us than there are of them. We're the ones that are living the lives. We're the ones that should be thriving. And many of us, as I say, would like to get on the land and just grow. And this is where I think the legislation has got to come to a point where the people have got to decide for themselves and say, do you know what? This is just not working. This isn't working anymore. I don't think this is a good idea. The public servants seem to have turned 180 degrees, and instead of being there to help us, they seem to be hindering us. And so therefore, if that legislation and the rules of the game are there to be detrimental to us, then the people should just ignore them en masse and say, enough is enough. You've had your chance, you've had your opportunity to show that you are worthy of us, the people. And if you're not worthy of us, then, in my opinion, it is time to change. The question is, what do you think? I'm just putting this out there as a matter of discussion. Now, we have a forum. It's the Vobes Forum, vobes-forum.com. I put the link in the description, and you can discuss this. And we ought to have a big discussion up and down the country, in the old meeting rooms, in the old town halls, in the stand in the parks, on the beaches, wherever, and discuss. We, the people, are the ones that live in this realm. We're the ones that should be making these decisions. And if it's not working, then we the ones should be the ones that decide that we're going to change it, not leave it to a few overpaid people who seem to decide what our future is. It's down to us, isn't it? I mean, I'm putting it out there as a discussion. You tell me. I'll be interested in your views. Thank you so much for watching.